I guess when you're planning out content, like even a blog post, you could say like, okay, after people read this blog post, what do I actually want them to do? And you will approach your blog much differently when you think of it that way, because instead of writing just a blog and then like, okay, hopefully that's going to serve my business in some way, you're going to be a lot more specific.
Get ready to build, protect, and sell your expertise online with the Online Genius Podcast. You'll laugh. We hope you won't cry, but you'll always be informed and prepared so you can have the success you want. Here's your host, Bobby Klink.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm really excited for today's show because we're going to be talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and that's copywriting. And specifically, we're going to be talking about copywriting for a purpose, to make a sale, to convince someone to take some kind of action. And that, I think, is a topic that we all need to learn about and a skill that we all need to improve. And as you know from my recent solo episode, I'm not exactly an expert at launching a product. I think I did pretty well, but I definitely could have improved things. And so I wanted to make sure to bring on a guest who could help walk us through the process of creating great copy for a launch, for a sales process, etc. And so I've brought on today Tarzan Kay. Now, Tarzan is a launch strategist and copywriter who's written for A-list clients like Amy Porterfield, Talia Wolf, and Ingrid Arna. She writes emails and sales pages for online course creators who want to create change and make a lasting impact on the world. Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, Tarzan.
Thanks for having me, Bobby. I'm happy to be here.
Now, I'm excited to talk about copywriting and launch strategy and all those things, but I always do like to get to know my guests a little bit before we start. Mm-hmm. And in preparing for the episode, you told me that you were originally going to school, I guess law school, to become a lawyer, but you changed course just a little bit. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, well, it's surprising, Bobby, how many copywriters went to law school. I'm definitely not the only one. I could probably name 3 if I thought about it for a little bit. So it seems to be like quite a common thing. Creative people that are like, hey, I can go to law school and just do something that's like really straightforward and has like a clear career trajectory, and I'll just do that and save myself from like doing all this like really difficult creative work. Not that being a lawyer is not difficult, because it definitely is. But I actually, funny enough, it gets even crazier. I started out in music school, and then I finished that degree and was like, what do I do next? I think I'll go to law school. And I went there for 3 years. And after 3 years was like, hey, this is not serving me. This is not the world that I belong in at all. So I just sort of bailed on my life completely, like where I was, like was living in Montreal at the time, gave up my apartment, my everything, and just like took some time off to travel. And when I started working again, started picking up the thread and having to make money again, I sort of stumbled upon copywriting. I got a job as a blogger and social media coordinator, which I really didn't know how to do and wasn't qualified for. But through that, I learned that such a thing as copywriting exists, and, started learning more about it, and eventually found myself where I am today, which is I have a copywriting business. I work for people who are launching online courses, and I fell into this niche of emails and sales pages because as a service provider, it's the most high impact thing that I can do, which means I can charge the most money for it and my clients can make the most money from it. So it's a win-win.
Well, so that actually kind of brings us to talking about copy. And I did like that on your website, you define or describe copy as words that make you money. And I think a lot of people would think of copywriting as as broader than that. But why do you limit it to that definition?
Well, I think ideally all the words that you write make you money, but your copy is what's like it's the closest to the money. So, your more content stuff, like your weekly emails and your blog or all those other things, your social media, that's like, that's all like pulling people in and connecting with them. But the copy is the stuff that's actually gets people to pull the trigger. And it's the most important, it's the most high stakes, and it's the most fun.
And I think you refer to that as conversion copy. Is that right?
Yeah, I would call it. So yeah, that is conversion. So conversion copywriting was a term that was coined by Joanna Wiebe of Copy Hackers. And I mean, it really, what it means is writing for conversion. So when you're starting out and your numbers are low, like you don't have tons of people looking at your emails and sales pages and stuff, conversion copywriting, I feel like, is a bit of a misnomer, because you might have, like, if you have 200 people on your email list, you might be like, yo, I have 70% open rates, but actually it's just because your numbers are low. So, and same thing with like, whoa, like my opt-in page is converting at like 30%, which is like amazing. And so I guess conversion copywriting can mean different things based on where you're at. But if you want to know in a nutshell, it's just writing to get people to take the action that you want to take. So if it's an email, it's like you're crafting an email to get them to click on the link and go look at your thing and get to the next step.
So it's basically just copy that you're writing to get them to take some other action. So anything with a call to action should be conversion copy.
Well, yes. I mean, theoretically, all copy should be conversion copy. If it's not, then it's not doing its job. But I mean, there are some principles, like not principles, but some methods that conversion copywriters use, like customer interviews or like looking at heat maps. And like, there are definitely some tools that are specific to conversion copywriters. But I have found for a lot of businesses that are starting out, sometimes those tools feel like it's just for big businesses. So for smaller, like startups, if you're just launching a course and you have, even like, I would consider myself a startup, like anyone who has like just a few thousand people on your list, maybe you're launching your first course. What you need to know about conversion copywriting is like, hey, maybe it's a good idea to interview your customers or your potential customers and start like pulling out the words that they actually say and using those on your sales page. That's an example of how you could use conversion copywriting on a sales page, for example.
Well, so let's talk for a second. And so we have conversion copy, which I will think of as, and I get your point that I think all copy should in some sense be trying to convert in some way, but I think there's the more direct conversion copy. So an opt-in page, a sales page,
yes,
a nurture sequence leading to that versus an about me page or blog content. And
yes,
what are kind of the different skill sets or different ways that you approach the two different kinds of copy in creating it for its best purpose, I guess?
So I actually don't write content at all. When people come to me for website content, I usually refer them out, unless they have a website that's pretty good. And then sometimes they'll book me for a day rate and we'll make it super awesome. But I do really actually focus on copy rather than content. But you can apply these principles. They're just a little bit harder. So let's say for a homepage, like I find homepages really difficult because it has so many different jobs. Like, what's the goal of that page? Is it to get people to book a consultation with you? Is it to get them to opt in to your email list? Is it to get them over to the services page and take the next step there? Like, it just has so many jobs. And when I'm doing conversion copywriting for, say, an email sequence or a landing page, the rule is like one email, one job, one landing page, one job. So you never have a sales page that links to like a blog post that you wrote. And actually, in fact, that's something that I often see with people that are more beginner is like they've written their sales page and they're like, hey, but I should like link to this blog post that's like really relevant here. Or like, hey, like I was published on Forbes, so I should like link away to my Forbes article so people know. But in that, you've just like muddied up the goal of the page, right? You only want them to do one thing, which is click through to the checkout page. You don't want any links going anywhere else. So I guess when you're planning out content, like even a blog post, you could say like, okay, after people read this blog post, what do I actually want them to do? And you will approach your blog much differently when you think of it that way, because instead of writing just a blog and then like, okay, hopefully that's going to serve my business in some way, you're going to be a lot more specific. Like, okay, I have this opt-in. Let's say right now I'm working on a new opt-in. It's called What's Your Pricing Personality? And it's a quiz. And I want to get people into this quiz funnel that I'm building. So when I'm planning the next blog post, I'm going to say like, okay, what am I going to write about that's going to actually make them want to take the next step and take this quiz? And maybe I'm going to come up with some ideas like mistakes entrepreneurs make when pricing their online course, or like how to 10x your rates for your service-based business. And both of those blog posts could like, they clearly serve my opt-in in a very direct way. So I'm getting them to the next goal. So you can think about your content in that way. Like, what is the goal of this? What action do I want people to take? And then build your content around that.
I think that's great advice. And I think so listeners who've been with me for a while will remember on episode 19, I actually interviewed Kevin Geary, and he gave me, I think, the best idea. This goes back to Tarzan, your comment about a homepage. What does a homepage do? Because he very much subscribes. Every page should have a single purpose. Mm-hmm. And his view is that your homepage is to put people in buckets. So the only point of your homepage on your website is to put them in the proper track or the proper bucket. But I do like the concept that you're saying all your content should be applying these concepts as well. So now I want to kind of dig into one of those or into some of those concepts. And I thought I'd ask maybe by asking, what do we get wrong? And by that, I mean, what are our biggest misconceptions about copywriting that you think we need to kind of get out of our heads?
Well, I think probably the biggest misconception is that you're not good at it. Like, oh, I have to hire this out. I'm not good at it. Like, I'm not a good writer. Writers are not born. Great writers are made. And the same is true of great copywriters. So anyone, and I definitely believe anyone can be a great writer and also be a great copywriter. It helps to be born with some natural talent. And I feel like I got lucky that way. But most of my writing skill comes from a lot of writing. Like, I write daily for several hours. I read a lot, and I have done so since I was a kid. So that is how I've become a good copywriter, and anyone can really learn this. And actually, I really believe that every business owner should, because there is just, particularly when you're starting out, and even like a small to medium sized online business, like there's so much writing involved. You can't outsource it all. So you really do have to be good at it. You have to learn some mastery over it. And what I want people to know is that you can. It's just like a little bit of practice, maybe take some training.
So what you're saying is if you want to get good at writing copy, maybe you should practice writing copy.
You should write copy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's some wisdom in that. And I know I was not a great writer, even as a legal writer when I first started. I luckily had some great mentors who helped me. And I was a very bad copywriter at this time a year ago. I was affirmatively bad copywriter.
Yeah.
And now I'm not great. I'm sure that, if I hired you, you would make my stuff much better, but I'm proficient. And so I think it comes into practice. But let me ask you, related to misconceptions, what are some of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're writing copy and trying to write conversion copy, especially?
Well, the biggest one I think we already alluded to, which is breaking the rule of one email, one job, one landing page, one job. Don't put too many links. Don't it is often the result of being a little bit unfocused in your business. Like, it comes out in your copy. If you're not really sure, like, am I focusing on promoting this program, or am I focusing on promoting, like, getting some new clients to my one-on-one services? That shows up in your writing everywhere if you're not quite sure. Like, it doesn't just, it shows up in how your business develops, but it shows up in your copywriting too. So does that answer your question?
I think it does, but let me ask you, let me follow up on that. So here's something I think a lot of people have a tough time with, which is, and this maybe isn't really, I know you do it, but it's not necessarily in your bailiwick of conversion copy, but people who send their weekly email out, and maybe it's telling people about the blog post. So if they have one blog post, it's easy. You talk about that one blog post. But what about, and let me ask you this. So I send out a weekly email with my podcast episode, but I'm tempted to put a PS line where I also say, hey, and if you like this, why don't you join my Facebook group? Is that violating the rule of one in your mind?
Yeah, I think that's a minor violation, but I definitely think that's a violation. I think it would be a lot stronger if you did a dedicated email and said, like, hey, guys, normally you hear from me on Tuesdays when my new podcast comes out, but this week I'd really like to tell you about what's going on in the private Facebook group. Come join me for this Facebook Live. Like, oh yeah, and you have to join first. Okay. You're going to think about it in a different way when you do a dedicated email to get people into your Facebook group. Like, you're going to make it juicier. You're not going to just say, like, how I see this all the time, like brick and mortar businesses have like a big sign in their window that says, like, join us on Facebook. And I'm like, well, why?
Yeah.
Why? I don't, like, you're on Facebook? Oh, really? Like, and I breathe air, by the way.
That's a good point. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Is it a violation of the rule of one if, for example, someone is putting out a bunch of content in a week and does a roundup email of all the content they put out? Or is that's different because your purpose is to give them links to everything you've done?
Yeah, I like a few of my clients do that for sure. And I think it's a good strategy, like at the end of the month to send them. The way that I usually see it positioned is like, hey, you might have missed something. Like, here's what we saw on the podcast. So in this case, it's like the goal is not to get them to click a specific link. The goal is to communicate everything that was on the podcast this month. So in that way, like, yeah, I guess sometimes you do have to be a bit flexible with links, but I'll tell you the goal of that is like, get them to click a link over to my podcast. All of those links go over to the podcast. Whereas in other newsletters, it's like the goal is to get you to click to the specific podcast. And I'll tell you, like, I have broken the rule of one myself. So it's not like I have never, you don't have to follow every rule perfectly, but in general, it's a pretty important one.
Yeah. Well, I think the general guidance people have is you shouldn't break the rules until you know them at the back of your head.
Yes. You want to be conscious about how you're breaking the rule.
Yeah. Well, so other than the rule of one, I know one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my copywriting, people might not have thought of it as a copywriting mistake, but I think it fundamentally was. And you alluded to it earlier. I made the mistake of not talking to my ideal customer avatar. And so as a result, I couldn't write good copy. Is that something you find a lot of entrepreneurs make that mistake?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's mostly symptomatic of not knowing who your ideal customer is. So that does happen at the beginning when it's like you're not really sure who you're serving. You haven't kind of seen yet who's really attracted to your product. So yeah, I think that's pretty important. I see a lot of times though, when people like early on in their business and they really aggressively attack this ideal customer avatar exercise, and they'll share like a write-up with me about who their ideal customer is. And a lot of the time they are just talking about themselves, because that's like often what they went into business for. Like, I overcame some big problem and now I'm teaching others to overcome the problem. Therefore, I'm designing this customer avatar who is me. I think it's really important to think about who that person is. But I also think in some cases, like this whole idea of the ideal customer avatar, people can sometimes take it too seriously.
Well, it's funny you say that. I had the opposite problem, Tarzan, because I was never targeting in my online business the people that, like me. I wasn't targeting other lawyers. And so, I had a really tough time, I think, for the opposite reason that getting into my, avatar's head was tough. And it took me some time, but now I think I've finally done it. So it's interesting.
Well, in that case, I think it's really important to do interviews. So what I was just speaking about earlier, my clients are mostly in personal development. Therefore, they're often talking to themselves. But yeah, in your case, customer interviews are so important. Like, to talk to those people, ask them questions, and record those interviews. Take aggressive notes while you're talking to them, or have someone else do it, and then use their language in your copy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I simply missed that step early on. I have to admit, I wasn't doing it. Now I've done tons of surveys. I talk to people, I get all.
Yeah, right.
So I definitely do that. And I get that. My journey has always been a bit different. Like, I read the things like Expert Secrets, and you read these things about crafting your story, and a lot of the models don't fit for me because I'm not guiding people a year behind me. But so I do want to transition to a topic that I think is touchy for a lot of entrepreneurs. And it clearly is something that copywriters understand is an issue. And that's that entrepreneurs, a lot of them, especially heart-centered entrepreneurs, have this concern that they don't want to sound salesy. And how do you go about doing that with copy, which clearly you're trying to make a sale? That's the purpose of the copy. So how do you write good copy that people aren't going to say, oh, that sounds too salesy?
Well, yeah. There's a way more important issue here, which is that we all have really messed up feelings about money. And I'm glad you asked this question. I actually teach a lot about money, and I even have a course about money for service providers, because we all have really weird aversion to hearing the sale or being pitched. And a lot of it is just man, you got to get over that. You have something to sell, something that you believe is important enough to dedicate your life's work to it. And you just have to get comfortable asking for the sale. And yeah, like it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning because you're not used to it, but you have to. Like, look, you mentioned Russell Brunson, like that guy is so aggressive in his sales, and he uses really obvious sales language, like stuff like, what would it be worth to you if, like, kind of thing, you know? He does that all the time. Like, it's very traditional, like old school sales language. He uses it like crazy, and he's doing really well. Like, the people who are worried about sounding salesy, they don't make sales. And it's not in the end, like, it's not really because they used the wrong language. It's because you didn't ask for the sale because you were so afraid of sounding salesy. Like, as I grow my business, I used to be that way as well. Like, I wanted to like send lots of like content emails before I could do a promotion. And now I'm like, you know what? If I have a product that, like, if I'm going to promote a product, someone else's or my own, that I think can really help, like, I'm just going to do it. It doesn't serve anyone for me to like pretend I don't have anything to sell. And I think for a lot of people, it's actually really freeing. Like, on a sales call, let's say I'm looking at hiring or let's say someone's calls me and they're on the sales call. Like, you will often hear me say like, hey, so like, let's talk about money. You want to talk about money? And there's an instant feeling of like, phew, like, I'm so glad she brought it up, because people can be quite averse to that. So I think it's really important to look at the question of like, why do I feel averse to, like, why am I scared to sound salesy? Why do I not want to ask for the sale? What's going on there?
So in other words, get over yourself. We're in business to make sales, and we should accept that. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. But also, like, I don't want to say like get over yourself, although that is what you have to do eventually. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Like, you probably were raised with like a lot of weird beliefs about money. Like, most of us were. For me, like, I grew up in like a very religious family where like wealth equals worldliness equals you are a sinner equals you're going to hell. So like, that plays out in a lot of different places in my business if I don't like consciously look at it and be like, okay, I don't agree with that. And I am like going to run my business based on a new paradigm. So it's not as simple as get over it. Like, we each individually have to look at like what's making us uncomfortable around the sale and why.
Well, and maybe I think some good advice to people might be push a little bit beyond your initial comfort zone, and then you get comfortable with it. And then maybe you can push a little bit further. You know, I have to admit on webinars, I still have a tough time doing the trial closes. Just, it's not natural for me.
Yeah.
But you watch Russell Brunson, and I mean, he just does it naturally. When he's talking now, he just naturally does those things. And for listeners, if you don't know, a trial close during a webinar is where you are basically asking a question in the middle of the webinar to get people to say yes. Just, you want them to start saying yes over and over again to things like, are you enjoying the webinar? Hey, are you getting this? Hey, does this make sense? Those kinds of things. So, you know, I'm working on it, and I think it's a great point there. And, you know, one question that comes up, and this isn't maybe necessarily strictly a copy question, Tarzan, but maybe you have some thoughts on it. And I'm thinking about it because I saw some conversations about it on Facebook, literally 2 different ones in the last couple of days. People are getting very annoyed, or some people are annoyed with scarcity tactics. And basically one person said, hey, if you say this is the final chance, I'm going to delete you and, you know, unsubscribe immediately. And then another person was complaining about any kind of upsell where there's a, hey, you can only get it on this page. I mean, is that another place where we just need to get more comfortable with these just general sales tactics?
Well, I think you need to be authentic in your marketing. Like, if the program doesn't really disappear and it's evergreen, like, don't say it's going away, because people know, like, we're all in a million sales funnels at once. And we know that, like, when you say it's going away, that it may not be going away. And people have ways of figuring that out.
Right.
If you're going to retarget them a month from now and start promoting your program again, like, don't tell me that it's closing right now. So, like, part of it, like, you have to be authentic. I definitely don't suggest lying about whether your program is closing. And you need to build in legitimate scarcity tactics, because people know what's fake. So even if it's like changing the language around, like, the program is not closing, but you can say, like, this bonus package will be expired. and then don't retarget them right away so they can just put themselves back to the top of the funnel and get all the bonuses. So, what's going on with your tech is pretty important there too. But the fact is, like, people need a push to buy, like they need a reason. So if you're not closing the doors to your program, or you're not building in some urgency, they're just going to put it off till next month, and they're not going to get the service that they need to get them to the next level. So, there's two sides to that.
Yeah. Well, and for the listeners, what I'll give you insight into what I'm doing. I'm currently, as I'm recording this 2 days from now, I'm going to start my weekly webinars for my membership site. And I'm not going to say that I'm closing the doors, because I'm not, but I'm tagging people as they go through, and they're going to get a tag. And after they get that tag, and they're there for a Wednesday webinar, and then if they don't buy by Sunday, they will not be able to get the bonus package, and it'll be tagged to my system, and they just won't be eligible for it again. So if they sign up later, my system still won't give them that opportunity for the bonuses. So that kind of is what it is. It'll automatically redirect them somewhere else. Say, nope, bonuses aren't available here. You can get this instead. So I think that's how you can build some scarcity in, if you want to, as part of a sales process.
Yeah, that sounds like a great strategy. And it's really important, because you will lose credibility with your readers. And a lot of people, they don't buy on the first launch. Like, you're going to launch your thing a couple of times, and then they're going to be like, oh yeah, I looked at this last year. Like, this year I'm going to do it. So you have to stay in integrity. They have to believe you and feel good about working with you.
Yeah. Well, so another thing I do want to talk about now, and I want to transition to, is sales pages. And as someone goes through the process of ultimately buying from you, theoretically, they're going to view multiple sales pages, starting with an opt-in page, which I view as a sales page. I think you would say the same.
Sure, yeah.
All the way through the actual sales page. Are there kind of keys to having a great sales page?
Well, for sure there are. Yeah. So we could talk about them generally, but so I think when you're starting out, it's a great idea to use a template. And I use a template almost every time. And that's probably, like, we've all seen like a lot of ads for the 3 Secrets webinar. Again, Russell Brunson's format. Like, I see that all the time. I see a lot of people using that template. I'm using that template right now for a course I have coming out soon about cryptocurrency. So it's a great template, and it's a proven template, but same thing goes for like a lot of the templates in lead pages. They are tested like hundreds of thousands of times. So I would not build a opt-in landing page like from scratch, just like based on what I think, because why would you, when you can benefit from like thousands of tests? Right. So use a template for sure. And same thing even for your long form sales page, like for your actual course, I use templates. I look at, like, there are programs when I'm on a launch and I'm looking at a sales page and I know that it's really successful. I know there's hundreds or thousands of people in the course. I take a screen grab and make a template out of it. So I don't use template. Like, in general, I've kind of found templates for sales pages, they're either hard to find or they're not good. But if you can templatize something that's already working and use that to create your sales page, that makes sure that you're not missing a lot of sections. Like, when people come to me with a sales page that's like half done, can we work on this together? I will find like, oh, look, you're missing some key sections. Like, for example, a guarantee. Is there a guarantee? Here are some points that you didn't address on this FAQ. Maybe they didn't even have an FAQ. Or like, let's see, what else? Who is it for? Who is it not for? That section, I think, should be on every sales page. Things like that, right? There are really common elements on landing pages that work. And if you just do a little bit, not even a lot, of research and look at pages that are working, you'll have a pretty good idea what's going to work for you.
So that's great advice. I have to say, when I was building out my sales page, I didn't do a screen grab, and I won't mention the copywriter's name, but there is a very famous copywriter who had a copywriting course. And I found his sales page that for some reason you could still access even though the course was closed. And I took that and said, oh, what are the blocks? And so I went through that and very much adopted that block for the templates. So I think that's great advice for people. I mean, don't try this from scratch.
Don't do it from scratch. The other thing is, it takes much longer from scratch. So much longer. Yep. If you have a template, it will go like at least 30% faster.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to write the copy and figure out that piece, but you at least say, okay, in this block, I need this copy, and so it's easier. But one thing, actually, since you mentioned the long form sales letter, again, this is in groups, I see this come up over and over again. People complaining about the long form sales page and why do they have to be so long? And what is your response to that?
Well, the people that buy it are the ones that actually read it. Like some clients will tell me too. They'll be like, "Hey, the people that buy my products are actually going to read this whole thing from the beginning to the end. The people that don't are the people that don't read it. So don't worry about those people if they're annoyed." You know what? I got an email. I love this so much. I got an email. This is the most brilliant email I think I've read in months or maybe years. It was from James Altucher, and he's promoting a new something or other right now. And he said, so he was just trying to get me to click on like a short interview. And he said at the end, he was like, interview is just a few minutes long. And then in parentheses, not one of those long promotions that you tell me you don't like, which I was like, oh, that's so refreshing. Like even people also tell James Altucher that they don't like his email or his promotions, and the guy's like super successful. He has like super long form sales pages, works with top copywriters. Like, people say that they don't like long form sales pages, and then they buy programs like on a long form sales page that they read the whole thing and thought it was brilliant and really wanted the product.
Well, and again, especially I think if you're doing webinars to launch a course anyway, half the people probably are never going to read the sales page, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But you need to have it there so that if they want to, they have that as an option. So I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And they're going to scan it. Like I don't read sales pages beginning to end. I scan it. Oh, what's this? Oh, there's an interesting headline. Let me read this section. Yeah. So it's like, if they read 25% of your sales page, that's great. But if you make it 75% shorter, how do you know you're going to hit the 25% that they actually read and enjoyed?
Right. Well, and I know a lot of people complain, well, I don't know the price at the beginning. Well, I don't know about you, but what I do, Tarzan, I go down to the bottom, I see what's the price. I say, is this something that I would even consider? Yes or no? And then if it is, I go back and I start reading.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people probably do that.
Yeah. One thing, so I'm working on a sales page right now for a program. I'm doing a live training, and I just put the pricing box right at the top. I was like, I know that people want to know that. Yeah. I know that's how I do it. So I'm just going to put it at the top and see how it goes. I saw I got the idea from a sales page that I saw, and I was like, oh, this is so refreshing that the price is at the top. And then I saw another sales page, and she had a button that said, just tell me how much it costs. And the button like skipped down to the pricing boxes.
Yep.
And I also thought that was super brilliant.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant because it gets people what they want, but also because it's good copy, right? It's
Yes.
So I think that's good. Now, I do want to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up. And really, this is about when should someone go about hiring a professional? So when does it make sense for someone like me to go and hire you rather than try to do it myself?
That's a really good question. And of course, it's different for everyone based on what their budget is, but there's so many things to spend on, even if you have a big budget. So I think what's important to add, like you can hire a copywriter at any stage of your business, and it can be a really good investment, but it depends on what the package is. Like, when someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I've got this course that I want to launch, like, can you work with me on it? I am absolutely not going to pitch them on like writing the whole sales funnel from the first opt-in page to the promo, the email sequence, all the landing. Like, I'm not going to do that because they haven't validated their course yet. Like, in order for it to make sense for me to write someone's whole sales funnel, like, it's not going to be cheap. It's going to be like at least $20,000. So I want to know that they've done like, so let's say 200,000 in course sales. For me, that's sort of the magic number. If they've done that before on their own without a copywriter, I'm like, yes, this would be a great investment. Like, let me write your whole sales funnel. But for someone that's starting out, I'll say like, hey, let's do a day together, and they'll book me at my day rate, which is $3,000. Like, we plan out their launch, do like some pretty hardcore strategy. We plan out every single landing page that they need. How many emails is there going to be? Like, what's the sort of loose content of all of those emails, the length of the promo, all those things. And then I'll do like, maybe I'll write some really important parts like the cart close emails or something like that, right? So I'm working with them like based on where they're at and where I want them to get return on investment. I need them to get return on investment. Otherwise, they're never going to come back to me. And worse, they're going to leave feeling like I paid this expensive copywriter and I got nothing. So when you're looking at hiring a copywriter, like you want to buy a copywriting package that really makes sense for where you're at in your business. And that's, of course, different for everyone. But don't buy a whole huge copywriting package if you haven't validated your course and you haven't had people buying it yet, I would say for sure.
Well, so let me ask you this though, then. So, and let's use your day as an example, because I think that's like 6 hours. So let's say someone was like me in a position where they've got a sales page written. They've got an email sequence written. If someone was in my position, would it make sense to come to you to buy a day where you could basically, I would think at that point, you would largely kind of go through and help improve the existing copy where there's already a launch strategy? Or would you say, start from the beginning?
No, for sure. Oh yeah, that's my bread and butter. So that happens a lot. A lot of people have so one thing that we will often do in that scenario is figure out like, okay, what's going to be like the most high impact thing? So I'll look at the sales page and I'll look at some of the emails, and sometimes like if there's enough volume, we can actually look at the conversion rates and see like where people appear to be dropping off. But in general, I look at the copy and I can diagnose really quickly like, oh, you have some obvious problems with this email sequence. Like I just did this with a client the other day and she had a whole funnel and like it's converting pretty well. And, I looked at the different places, and as soon as I looked at the promo sequence, I was like, whoa, there's like a huge problem here. We definitely have to focus on that. So, and a good copywriter should be able to do that. They should be able to look at your funnel and be like, hey, this is probably where you're going to get the best return. Let's work on this.
Okay. And so just again, to help people understand, realistically, whether it's you or someone else, were buying 6 hours of time copywriting, I mean, would they expect that you would be able to rewrite, say 2-3 emails, a sales page? What are we talking about in that amount of time?
So every copywriter is different for sure. And the way they work is different. So like for a sales page, let's say I'm working with someone on a sales page, I mean, for any normal person, copywriter or not, is going to take a couple of days for sure. Like a long form sales page, they're massive. They're big behemoths.
Right.
Even if they're small behemoths, they're still long. So what I do is I give people a template and they get like a really good start on it. And then I come in and then I make it amazing in that one day. And sometimes like I have written them from scratch in a day if it's a previous client and I know, or maybe they've booked a couple of days. So like we have one day to do a lot of strategy and figuring out like who it's for and all those things. Then I can, and it's maybe a industry that I know about. So I can go in there and like knock it out in a day. But that's me. Like some copywriters I know, like I have one copywriter friend, and like whenever someone comes to me with a rush job, I'm like, oh, send it to my friend Prerna. She's like so fast. I don't know how she does it. It's ridiculous. And so all copywriters are different. Like and there are more important things than how fast are they going to get the work done. Because I am a bit of an anomaly in that I charge by the day. Most copywriters are charging they're charging a project-based fee. So you don't really need to know how long it takes them. You just need to know when you're going to get it and what it's going to cost.
Okay. Interesting. Well, Tarzan, this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed it. I could keep asking you questions forever, but I want to honor your time. And so I do want to ask you one last question. And this is that, I like to think in digestible steps or action steps that people can take. So what I'm wondering is, what could my listeners do, say in 5 minutes a day, or, not 5 minutes a day, but done by the end of the week, to start to improve their copywriting skills?
So a couple things come to mind, but what I would really love to see all of your listeners do by the end of the week is email their list, whether there's 5 people on it or 100 people on it. I see a lot of focus online about list building, and I don't see very much focus on what to actually email them after you have built your list. So people think they don't know what to write or that they can't write good emails, but they can, but they won't get it right on the first shot. So start emailing your list. If it's small, it's a really great opportunity to practice when there's only a few people reading them. It's like a little bit less pressure. So that's what I would like to see everyone do by the end of the week. And if you only have 5 minutes a day, like go to whatever writing app you like that makes it really easy for you, and just spend 5 minutes a day writing something with zero judgment. Like, I'm just spending these minutes writing, and it's not going to be published. No one's going to see it. I'm just going to do it. There's a website called 750words.com I know some people use, and they just like to keep sharp and write. It's pretty fast to write 750 words if you're not self-judging. So just like keep it up. That's how you get good. It's just by doing it.
Yeah. Like you said before, if you want to be a great copywriter, start writing copy. Mm-hmm. So I think that's great advice. And Tarzan, I want to thank you for all of the great advice. Where can my listeners get in touch with you, find out more about you, or, if they maybe wanted to book you, where do they do that?
Well, they can do all of that at tarzankay.com. If you want to get to know me, join my email list. Emails are my superpower, and I make them really exciting. People love them. They're fun, and they're unlike any emails you've ever read.
And we will have a link to that, but it's a pretty simple webpage, but we'll have a link to that and some other information about Tarzan as well. So Tarzan, I want to say thank you for coming on. It has been fantastic.
Thanks, Bobby. It's a pleasure.
And listeners, stay tuned for my quick legal lesson after the break.
And now for today's legal lesson.
Yay! Hey there. That interview with Tarzan was fantastic. She is a really interesting and great copywriter. And I love that she's to the point, cuts to the chase, and gives you this information and tells you it's about money and isn't going to hide behind that or be afraid of talking about the money issues. In today's legal lesson, though, I wanted to touch on something that would apply if you hire Tarzan or any other copywriter, but also more broadly if you hire any other independent contractor. And that is my continuing theme that you need to get your agreements in writing. And it's especially important with a copywriter or someone like that, because let's think for a second what a copywriter is going to do. If you were to hire, Tarzan or anyone like her to really do an in-depth work with you, they're going to do a lot of stuff. They're going to have access to information you've collected. At a minimum, they're going to want to see surveys you've done of customers and testimonials. They might even want to talk to your customers and get some great information from them about what they know. They're going to want to see the insides of your funnels and all of these different things about you. Then they're going to create a bunch of content for you. It's going to be written content of various forms. Maybe it's, in Tarzan's case, she, for example, would give you a template, or if you hired her more for a bigger package, but anyone else the same way, they're going to write emails for you. They're going to write sales page copy for you, all that. Well, guess what? If you don't have the right agreements in place, they own the copyright to that material. So let's talk for a second about what you're going to want in an independent contractor agreement. And it's especially important that you do this with any contractor, like a copywriter, like a designer, who's going to be involved in any piece of content creation for you. But you should apply it more generally to independent contractors because you might as well get it in place. Now, so an independent contractor agreement, some of it will be pretty basic. It'll be things like setting out, hey, here's what you're going to do for me. Here's what I'm going to pay you. That should be as specific as possible, so there's really no debate or question. I've told the story in the past of where I had hired a marketing consultant or consultancy, and they were supposed to do some things for me of creating funnels and set up affiliate programs, do all of these other things, to take some things off my plate. Well, luckily, me being the lawyer that I am, I made sure that the agreement was very explicit about what they were going to do, but they didn't do a lot of it. And so because it was explicit, because there was a lot of information about, hey, you will do X in month 1, you will do, Y in month 2, when they didn't comply, I was able to go back and say, hey, what's going on? And, in that case, it ultimately turned out that they just had to give me a refund because they weren't going to be able to get the work done. But if it hadn't been explicit, if it had just been, well, we'll provide marketing services, it would have been hard for me to do that because they had done something and done maybe some marketing services. But that's why you want to make it very explicit what they will do so there's no question later on. That's just general advice for any kind of written contract. You should have that. But when you're dealing with an independent contractor, there's some other things you definitely need to include. One of them is confidentiality clauses. You need to have clauses that essentially say that any confidential information that you share with them, they don't use for any purpose other than your project. So that means they can't use it to create a competing product. They can't use it in serving someone else. They can't share it with anyone, etc. It's also going to have clauses that say that they have to return and or destroy all copies of any confidential information they get after they're done serving you. So in other words, they don't get to keep copies of this stuff. They get rid of it, or they give it back to you if it's a hard copy and original. So that's kind of some of your protection to make sure they do it. Now, if you think about it, that's especially important if they're going to have access to any of your internal workings, or if they're going to talk to customers and do things like that. You might want that to be very confidential, where they're not going to share that with anyone else other than for your purpose. So you can see how that gets to be very important for some contractors you work with. Now, then the other piece is an intellectual property transfer clause. What this will generally say is that to the maximum extent allowed by law, any of the work product they create is yours to start with. They don't even have a right in it. And that's important because under copyright, there's a theory known as, or a doctrine known as work for hire, where if you hire someone to do something, to create something for you, in certain circumstances, you will own the copyright from the outset. They would never own it. And you're going to want to have language about that in there. But so it has that language that says, hey, to the maximum extent allowed, I own it from the start. But then there's even further language that will say that they are transferring the intellectual property to you to the extent they have to. And that needs to be what, I won't get the verb tense correct, but it basically needs to be in present tense. It's not that they will transfer, it's that they are hereby transferring the rights to you. Now, you'll want to have some future language in there as well to make them cooperate, but you want to go ahead and do that. That way, if it's a designer, you own the design. If it's a copywriter, you own the work. They don't own the copyright. If it's anyone else who does anything for you, you're going to go ahead and own, any trademark rights, any copyright rights, etc. All of that stuff is gone ahead and transferred to you. So you need to have that language, because without a written agreement, you might not own that stuff. And if you think about it, that's a big problem. So those are kind of the big pieces. There's going to be other pieces to these agreements. You're going to have things, some legal boilerplate. I'm not going to go into that here, but the important thing is you need to have the terms of, what service they're providing, what you're paying them, and then the confidentiality provisions and the intellectual property transfer provisions. Now, if you're working with a bigger independent contractor, I'm assuming Tarzan would already have an agreement that she would start with. You need to make sure those clauses are in it, though. You need to be clear about that. But some copywriters you're going to work with aren't going to have agreements. So you're going to need to have your own basic independent contractor agreement ready that you can use and that you're comfortable using for any of the contractors. And again, think about this. It's designers, it's copywriters, it's virtual assistants, it's anyone else who is helping you work on projects, but they're not an employee. So if you're paying them and would give them a 1099 here in the United States at tax time, then you need to have an independent contractor agreement with them. So that's my legal lesson. If you need help getting that agreement, I've got templates for sale, or you can, join my Facebook group, Legal Secrets for Online Entrepreneurs, where we talk about these kinds of things. I'm always there to help. But that's it for this lesson. Until next week, I'm Bobby Klink signing off.
Thanks for listening. And remember to visit mistakes.youronlinegenius.com to get your essential guide to the 4 legal mistakes that can doom your business and how to avoid them. Join us next week for another episode to expand your online genius and your success.